This is the story of the Soviet Union. It was founded in the middle of World War One. It was based on the idea of equality and the improving of the regular person's life, and of course, peace. World War One, right? We want to have peace, but those dreams were crushed. Russia fell into civil war, communists versus anti-communists, the whites and the reds being communists. And after the Civil War, people still lived in fear. There's Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev. These are dictators who kept their people afraid of them to keep their people in line. They developed nuclear weapons and put the world at risk of nuclear war with the United States. It eventually collapsed at the end of the 20th century. That's the late 1900s, 1990. Fell apart. So, Soviet history spans several decades, 7 decades, 70 years of Soviet rule. It starts with the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II. Centuries of royal rule came to an end. He was the king, the Tsar, and he stepped down during the Civil War, before the Civil War. The Bolshevik Revolution led to the implementation of communist economic and social policies. The Bolsheviks were the communists, those fighting the Civil War in Russia. In 1922, when Russia became the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, the nation was still a largely agricultural country. It means mostly farmers. Over the course of the next 70 years, the USSR became an industrialized power. It starts to look more like Rouge with factories. However, the repressive top-down implementation of a planned society never fully met the needs of the people. Communism does not meet the needs of the people. Discontent grew in the 1980s, and ultimately leading to the collapse of communist regimes across Europe. Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union's last leader, the last leader of the Soviet Union, resigned on Christmas Day 1991, and the Soviet Union was a dominant world power throughout most of the 20th century. The USSR was a massive territory. As the slide shows, its vast extent embraced both Europe and Asia, two continents so big. When the sun rose in the east of Russia, it was still dinner time in the west of Russia. Geographic conditions were very different across this land. You have your permafrost forest and the Arctic Circle to temperate, kind of like where Michigan's at, that kind of environment, and even Mediterranean climates like Southern Europe has in the south of Russia. As with any territory of comparable size, a wide variety of natural resources exist within the boundaries of Russia. So the boundaries of Russia are 8,650,000 square miles. It covers two continents, Asia and Europe. It's 1/7 of all the world's landmass is the Soviet Union, was the Soviet Union. It has 11 time zones. That's how big it is. You'd go through 11 different time zones if you went through the whole Soviet Union. When it talks about the environment, they have tundra, they have taiga, they have humid continental areas, they have steppe areas, and Mediterranean climates. They got it all. And when it comes to natural resources, they have a lot of forests. Timber is wood. They have a lot of wood. They have mineral ores, so they can dig up coal and metals. They have precious stones and amber and other metals. You can get oil and natural gas, and they have a lot of farmland, a lot of land. These pictures illustrate some of the geographic variation that existed within the Soviet Union. How might this variation have affected the cultural adaptation of the people in different regions? Well, cultural adaptation involves using different technologies to exploit specific kinds of food and resources, different methods of building shelter, different methods of transporting goods and people, and so forth. So, what agricultural region surrounds Moscow? That's the green area here. It's a light and dark green. In Moscow, where most of the people live, it has a lot of livestock, cattle, cows, and a market gardening. So a lot of food. Where the people are, there's food. Makes sense. We see this in other cultures. Um, and it's located on a river, so we have the water. Where were the Soviet Union's main grain producing regions? Where did they get most of their food? Well, if you look at this map, you'll see the orange area south and southeast of Moscow is the region where the main growing occurred. So, what types of activities took place within the vast gray area in the east? If you look east on this map, there's a lot of gray. This is land for the forest. You can hunt in the forest. You can maybe have some animals there to get some food from. This map illustrates the fact that a country this large had the potential to produce a large number of different kinds of things, had a lot of natural resources, agricultural products. It's very diverse. Now, because of its size, the territory that became the Soviet Union embraced an enormous variety of people and cultures. The cultural and national groups, listed on this slide illustrate just a part of the human diversity that existed in the Soviet Union. What would have been necessary to unite so many different people into one country? Well, they need to have a common language, common or official culture that they all share. A nation, they need to share some things in common. So, language, an official culture, laws, common laws for all of them that either protect minorities or conversely, laws that obligate minorities to convert their language, their culture, their religion to the official or the main group's religion. This is how you turn this large area into an area that works together as one. What major nationalities does this map show? Where do they reside? You can see it looks like a painting. There's so much going on in Russia. There are so many nationalities, types of people, and they're pretty spread out. Where it's most diverse, though, I think we can all agree, is the Western area. This is where most of the people live and still today live in Western Russia, the European part of the country. The Asian part is mostly empty. So let's talk about early Russia, before Soviet Union. The Romanovs were the last dynasty to rule Russia, ending with Tsar Nicholas II. He abdicated. Alexander I ruled from 1801 to 1825, followed by Nicholas I from 1825 to 1855. Then Alexander II took the throne and ruled until his assassination in 1881. He was followed by Alexander III, 1881 to 94, and then Nicholas II was the last Romanov Tsar. He ruled from 1894 until he abdicated in 1917, in the middle of World War I. That is the story of the Romanovs, the royal family of Russia. The Congress of Vienna enabled Russia to take Finland, Bessarabia. That's a region southeast of Europe that lay between the Dniester and the Danube rivers, and territory in Poland. By 1825, the push for liberal reforms fed the Decembrist revolt. They revolted for reforms, more people power, which occurred when the Romanov Constantine, who was actually the rightful heir to the throne, passed up the throne in favor of his younger brother, Nicholas I. 5 leaders of the revolt were executed. Several hundred soldiers were also punished. Russia had lost the Crimean War to Turkey. The loss contributed to the social unrest at home. People were not happy with their country. It was losing wars. It was being unfair to them. Serfdom had persisted much longer in the Soviet Union than in Western Europe. However, Alexander II abolished serfdom in 1861. About the same time as the American Civil War, the Soviet Union, or Russia at the time, was getting rid of its slaves too. 22 million emancipated serfs did not win economic autonomy. However, they received only a small bits of second-rate farmland and were required to pay for it. Russia's agricultural economy thus remained limited. So the slaves in Russia were freed, but they didn't get much out of it. It was hard to make a life. They had the Trans-Siberian Railroad was built at the end of the 1800s, and this established the potential for increased exploration of natural resources, exploitation of natural resources in the Russian heartland. It's hard to get to there, but now with this railroad, we can get more things from it. The development of remote industries and later the construction of networks of labor camps and prisons scatter the eastern part where very few people lived. During this time, socialist ideas began to find their way into Russia, leading to growing dissatisfaction with royal power and pressure for reform. One of the socialist doctrines was Marxism. So, that's it for this video. You have a Google forum to answer these two questions.